All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. We have some others, students and interested candidates that are joining in right now. So we'll get started in just a second. You were here. This is a webinar on the SSCCC Board and Region Officers election process. So what we're going to go through today is what elections look like, the positions that you can run for, what does campaigning look like, what does the nomination process look like, all of those different things within the process. Next week, we'll be actually having another webinar on the positions themselves, what goes into each of the positions, what are their job duties, what are their roles, and things of that sort. But today, we're going to focus specifically on the process, how elections are going to be run at General Assembly for both the board officers and for the region officers. So that's what we're going to get into today. And there's going to be a time to ask questions at the end, so please hold your questions until the end. If you feel like you're going to forget them, please just write them down and we'll go from there. So let's get started. First off, we want to go with SSCCC's commitment. Our commitment is really to a transparent, fair, and equitable elections for all of our board officers. Let me just start by saying when I came into the SSCCC, if you ran for a board officer position, you were actually just appointed by the board of directors. So when you wanted to be the president or the VPRA or the vice president of finance, they actually selected their nomination from the rads and the lads that sat around that table at their first meeting. That is completely different from where we are now, to where all of our delegates are the ones that are actually voting you into your position. It's the voice of the students that are putting you into these leadership positions. And when I ran for my year, when I became president, that's the first year that we actually did that, which was about 4 years ago, where we actually brought this back to the students. So the SSCCC's commitment, we are here to guarantee transparent, fair, and equitable elections for our board officers. We want openness and impartiality. Our commitment aims to provide all candidates with equal opportunities and foster an inclusive process. Everything that you're going to hear today is subject to all candidates, right? There's no wiggle room to be lenient towards one person more than the other. And the focus is on ensuring that the elected leaders effectively represent the diverse student body of the board of directors. We want the students to put in student leaders that really represent them. So that's what we're here to do. And I really appreciate the student leaders that are on this call that are looking into, being maybe a possible student leader in the future within the SSCCC. So let's talk about the positions that you can run for. At General Assembly, you can run for a board officer position. Board officer is a statewide elected position. The positions that are going to be elected are the president, vice president of regional affairs, the vice president of legislative affairs, vice president of finance, and the vice president of communication. If you're looking into what those positions entail and what are their roles, their duties, you can save that. We're going to have a webinar next week that goes through each of those specific roles and really goes in depth with the experts that are in those positions, and that's the students themselves. So the students that have held these roles throughout the past year are going to give you a webinar. Hey, this is what my job looks like if you're interested in running. So for the board officers, their elections are separate from the regional officers. The board officers election happens on the Sunday of General Assembly. That's Sunday, April 7th. It is going to be by ballot through Poll Everywhere. So every delegate is going to have a vote. So that's up to 116 delegates that we have. We'll have one vote, one per college, and they will cast their vote for their best candidate. It's going to happen during the general session. So anyone that is there, any college that is there will have a delegate that's representing them that will be able to vote in the elections. And even we'll have some remote participants via Zoom that will be able to vote also. And again, this is only one vote per college through their delegate on Sunday, April 7th. And it's through our Poll Everywhere software. And you will find out there on that Sunday exactly who wins every position for board officers. For your regional officers, we also have 5 different regional officer positions. There are regional affairs director, the vice chair, the legislative affairs director, the treasurer, and the communications officer. Now, a regional officer represents their region. However, 2 of the regional officers serve on the board of directors at the statewide level, and that is the Regional Affairs Director and the Legislative Affairs Director. Although all 5 of these are voted on by the region, those 2 will still serve at the statewide level. The region officers voting process, they're actually going to be voted in to their positions for the region on Friday, April 5th of General Assembly. So that first day of General Assembly, every region is going to have a special region meeting to do elections. And that's per our policy. They will have those elections. Any position that is not filled, there will be a special election in the future to be able to fill those roles. So they'll probably do it at their May meeting later on in that next month. For the region officers, because we are doing it there in person, it will be through voice vote. We do not have poll everywhere for our regions, but it will be through voice vote. It will be through the region delegates. So each region has anywhere between 7 to 15 colleges, and those colleges, their delegate will vote into those elections for the specific positions, and they will go position by position to be able to vote those people into their roles. Each region will have their own room at General Assembly. We will also have the capability of doing Zoom. So if there are students that are trying to run that did not come to General Assembly, they can still run via Zoom. That's for a regional position or a board position. And if there's a delegate that did not come to General Assembly or a college that did not make it to General Assembly, they can still vote via Zoom on Friday for the region and on Sunday for the board positions. And again, for these, we're going to be talking about this next week at the webinar. So let me go through a quick elections timeline. The top timeline is the executive elections timeline. This is for your statewide board positions, the president and the 5 vice presidents. So there was an election announcement sent out last week. Today is February 7th. We have our election webinar. There is a Google form that we can drop into the chat later. It is your intent to run application. It is just a quick Google form that gives us all of your information, what position that you plan on running for, and a gist of, what does your candidate statement look like, and that what the policies and procedures that surround elections are. So we have some links to those, and you can go in and look at that. It also will require your advisor to sign off that you are in good standing or are eligible to run as a student, and we'll get into eligibility in one of the future slides. So your intent to run application is due by February 19th. February 23rd, you will be notified whether or not you are eligible. That's based on the fact that we have, reviewed the material that your advisor sent in to us. March 11th is when candidate statements are due. We are going to talk in this webinar about candidate statements. There are specific requirements in your candidate statement that if you do not fill, you will be disqualified from running. And every candidate, even if they are nominated from the floor, must turn in a candidate statement. March 18th, the candidate statements will be posted online. And then April 5th, there will be a mandatory candidate information and forum session. So during the General Assembly on that Friday is when we do our nomination process. Everyone that has turned in a candidate statement is already nominated and they are running for their position. There's an opportunity that, hey, maybe I didn't know about elections and I didn't know that there were positions, and I'm here at General Assembly and I want to run. You can be nominated from the floor by a delegate. They can nominate you. Every single person that is nominated, whether through a candidate statement or through a nomination from the floor, has to attend 2 meetings during General Assembly on that Friday. The first one is an information session. It's going to happen during lunchtime, and it's pretty much your one time to have a meet and greet with your delegates. It is, hey, this is what I'm running, and it's their time to ask you personal questions. What are those things that you stand for? What are you going to do if you are elected into office? Those things. Then there is a mandatory forum that happens later on in the evening that day, and this is where the elections chair will chair the forum, and it's really your formal statement to the students and to the leaders out there. Hey, this is my introductory of who I am, my intro to running statement, and then they will be able to ask you questions in the form of or they will ask you questions by writing into the elections chair, and the elections chair will ask those questions of the candidates, sort of like what they do at the statewide level currently. So you can take a look at that. There's some outlines to that in our policy, so you can take a look later. But April 7th is when elections are happening, and that's for the executive elections for the statewide positions of president and all of our vice presidents. Now, for your regional election timeline, on February 5th, your regional candidate packet is going to be released. That's what we've sent out. Hey, there are positions that are open. March 29th is when all candidate statements and the forms are due. This is because we are going to throw together your candidate statements onto the agenda for your meeting that is happening that next week. And then on April 5th, there will be the regional officer elections. They happen between 6 and 7:30. 6 is the start time. In each of the different region rooms, forgive me. So there will be a room for every region. They will hold their elections there. It'll have the Zoom capability, and you'll go through your elections. Now, the process is a little bit different because the region officers are not required to be a part of the forum. That is strictly for the statewide positions. However, the candidate statements are still the same requirements of the region officers as they are for the statewide executives. And we'll get into all of those requirements later. And if you have any questions, we'll take them at the end. So let's talk about your eligibility. First off, your eligibility has to comply with law and with education code. In education code, any student that is elected to serve as an officer must meet one of these 3 requirements. The first is they have to be enrolled into a community college at the time of the election and throughout their term with a minimum of 5 units, and they have to maintain the minimum standards of scholarship, meaning they have to be in good academic standing with their community college district. So that's the first, 5 units, good academic standing. The second is if you are part of an adult education program, again, still enrolled through your college, but you're in an adult education program, then the 5 units does not come into play, or the good academic standing. It is the adult education program. And there are some subsections that you can read what those adult education programs are that qualify for that. The last one is if you are enrolled in the time of election throughout your term and you are a disabled student that is defined in section 84850 of education code. So if you're a part of that DSPNS program, whatever that is on your campus, so you need to meet one of these 3 requirements to be able to run for a position within the SSCCC. That is the first eligibility requirement. You also need to comply with the SSCCC policies and procedures. There are term limits. There are other things that will come into play, code of conduct. So if you are in violation of any of those are also grounds for you not to be able to run in this upcoming election. Candidate statements. These are the requirement for candidate statements. It is a 1-page biography, 8.5 by 11. With your name, college, candidate position, and answers to the following. These questions must be answered in your candidate statement. I'm going to show you some examples of candidate statements on the next page, but make sure you go through and you answer these questions however you would like through your candidate statement. And it can be as creative as you'd like also, and you'll see that through our examples. But the first question is, after reviewing the job description for the position, what activities and specific skills make you qualified, and why are you running? So what is it that puts you into the, into this position? What makes you a good candidate for it? And then please briefly discuss the core commitments of the vision for success and your understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So include that in your biography or your candidate statement. And then what issue in higher education are you most dedicated to addressing, and why? What is your biggest platform that you are running for? And then an additional question for our rads and lads out there is, what makes you best suited to serve as a voting member of the SSCCC Board of Directors? So all of these questions must be answered in your candidate statement, or you will be disqualified from running. So make sure that you turn this in. The elections chair and possibly the elections committee will review these and make sure that everything is compliant within the candidate statement guidelines. So here are a couple of candidate statement examples. As you can see, the one on the left has to be a great statement because this person ended up winning our election for president, but you could see very creative pictures, everything like that, was able to go through and state all of their priorities, why they were running, their commitment to DEIA, and all of that. And it didn't go through just a paragraph. Whereas on the example on example 2, just a paragraph did not touch on the other, did not touch on the questions. So we want to make sure that we're touching on the questions, making it as creative as possible. So let me talk about the elections process, the run of show. When we get there on Friday for General Assembly and we open the floor for nominations, it will go through the nomination process on Friday. We will announce all of those people that are running. Then we will say, okay, now the floor is open for any nominations for the position of president. Any delegate can come to the mic and say that they nominate a specific person. After all of those nominations have ended, we will close the nominations and move on to the next position. Vice president, same process, closing it off after it's done, then go to vice president of regional affairs, and so on and so forth until all of them are done. Then all of the elections are closed, or all of the nominations are closed. Those people will participate in the information session that will happen during lunch right after that session. And then they will be informed that, hey, they need to turn in a candidate statement by midnight that night, or a specific time that the elections chair will announce. If it's not midnight, but I believe that's what the time was last year. So you will have up until that time to send out your candidate statement, make sure it gets screened, and then it will be sent out later on to all the delegates and all attendees of the General Assembly. On Sunday, we will do the voting by delegates. We will pull up each position. You will not see the results as they are happening, but we will pull up the positions afterwards, and every delegate will be able to cast their vote. We'll show the results, and you need to win by a majority vote, and we will go into what that looks like and whether or not there will be a runoff in a future slide. Quorum is the requirement, as they are of any meeting. A quorum for our delegate assembly is the majority of those that are registered. So we do have 116 colleges. However, in the past couple of years, we averaged about 90 college attendees, which would mean we would need at least 46 people voting for these elections. All right. So it's the quorum of those that have registered for the conference. So just wanted to give you a heads up of that. But we will go through the elections by position. You will hear the results for every position, and then we will move on and finish any resolutions that we have on that day on Sunday. So I want to get into the forum a little bit and what to expect for the forum. As I said earlier, all board executive officer candidates must participate in the candidate information and forum session that's held that evening. Any member of the public, voting delegates, current members of the board can ask candidates a question, and the executive director or the designee will facilitate the candidate information and forum session that comes straight from our policy. The way that the forum is going to go later on that evening, you will give an introductory speech by position, in order by your last name. You will give your introductory speech up to 3 minutes, give that speech. We will go through every single position, and then there will be questions from the audience. The questions from the audience can be submitted early. We will screen them, give them to the elections chair, which is the executive director, and they will ask the questions of the candidates that are there. If there is a candidate that makes a statement that is a quote unquote attack on another candidate that is up there, that candidate has the opportunity to refute or rebuttal that statement. And the executive director will be able to screen that, will hear the attack and be able to give that candidate the opportunity to respond. And then we will have our concluding statements, permitting that, or time permitting, and then we will go on from there. Now, this is the only time that you are to be quote unquote campaigning during the General Assembly. This is you telling the students why you are running, and what you are here, what is your purpose, why you would be a great fit for that role. Outside of the forum and the information session, you cannot do that. And we'll get into why. So there are some limitations on campaigning. Your campaigning has to stop once General Assembly begins. Before General Assembly, you can have your own campaign Instagram and social media. You can make posts. You can give public comment at student government meetings. You can do all of that. But once General Assembly starts, you may no longer do that. And any campaign violation will result in disqualification. All right, so going through all of these, I just want to make sure you know, if you violate this, you will be able to, or you will be disqualified. There's no campaigning during the event, whether you are in person or virtual. That includes social media posts. Telling people to vote for you on your social media is not allowed also. All right, so making sure that that happens. There are spending limitations. You are only allowed to spend up to $100, whether that's cash or donations. And you must save your receipts, because if there is an accusation that you did spend more, the elections committee may request those receipts of you to make sure that you can document that this is all that you spent and that's all the funds that you allocated towards your campaign. Any violations by students, other candidates, need to be brought to the attention of the elections chair, and there should be documentation. Hey, I saw this Instagram post, here it is. There was this conversation that was being had, and these are the witnesses that were there. And that needs to be brought to the elections chair. The elections chair will take any of those violations to the elections committee, and the elections committee will weigh in on those. The committee meets at least once before General Assembly just to go over their run of show during the event. They will also meet during GA to rule on any alleged violations. So they will say, hey, you know what? They'll hear the facts from both sides. They'll weigh in, and then they will give a result right there before the election happens. Last year, sadly, we did lose a couple candidates because of violations. So we want to make sure that we're getting this information out to you beforehand in a more direct way. So that way we do not lose our candidates for things like campaigning or candidate statement violations. All right. Yes, Associate Director Goldman. All right, we're going to keep going. So some things to note that I wanted to get into, just some information. There is no teaming up in elections. You cannot run as a slate. You cannot run as a coalition. You cannot run in independent groups. Dr. Adams, you're recognized.
So Associate Director Goldman could not unmute herself, so I've changed the function if she'd like to unmute herself.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, Stephen, campaigning at GA also includes other folks endorsing you or campaigning on your behalf, correct?
That is correct, and that will come under, that will be at the discretion of the elections committee. And I think Dr. Adams can weigh in a little bit more as the chair of the elections committee.
No, Associate Director Goldman is correct. You cannot have folks. You can have conversations with folks. If somebody approaches you and asks you questions, you can have conversations. But other people campaigning for you or negative campaigning will not be tolerated, and you may be disqualified.
Yes. And again, that's going to be at the discretion of the elections committee. If there are violations that are brought, that means you cannot send out your little minions and say, hey, go and get as many delegates as possible to be able to vote on my behalf, anything like that. So making sure that that is taken care of. And thank you for that, Associate Director Goldman. So again, there are no slates, coalitions, independent groups. You as a candidate cannot endorse another candidate and say, hey, you know, if you vote for me, this person is also, you know, a great candidate to vote for. We're running together, you know, president, vice president combo. There's none of that happening during General Assembly. We've seen it happen in the past, and it has run into some complications. So we want to make sure that that doesn't take place. There are some endorsement rules. The board of directors, regional officers, board members, regions themselves cannot, and anyone else associated with the SSCCC staff, anything like that, cannot endorse a candidate. The candidates, however, can go out and seek endorsements from others, like say their student government, you know, other people within, you know, the legislature, whoever it is, and they want to seek some sort of endorsement from somebody else, as long as they are not associated with a region, board of directors, things like that, that is totally okay. The presiding officers during elections, for the elections at the statewide level, the president, unless the president is running for a position, will be presiding over the elections for the statewide level. And then your regional affairs director, again, unless they are running for a regional position, will also be the presiding officer during regional elections. Disqualifications will happen at the discretion of the elections committee and the elections chair. And again, it's for things like candidate statements, for violations of your campaigning policy, and things of that sort. There are runoff elections, runoff election procedures. If you do not receive a majority of the vote, so maybe, you know, there's you know, the top 4 candidates or so all received about 30%, right? Or like, you can't have 4. So maybe there's someone that received 30, someone that received 20, another that received 10, and everybody else received less. What we would do in the runoff is the top 2 vote getters will have a runoff election, and whatever one receives the majority out of those 2 will be the one that wins that election. All right, so that's how the runoff elections go. So top 2 vote getters will go if there is not a majority that the winner receives. If you are disqualified, the runner-up is the one that would receive the position. So if you are disqualified, you do not reach your documentation after you receive the position. We'll get into that in a little bit, but the runner-up would be the one that would receive that that nod and would receive that position. If you are running unopposed, there's one thing that we call acclamation for unopposed candidates. If you're running unopposed, especially in the regional officer elections, if you were running unopposed, there is no reason for us to go into all of those questions if the delegates decide not to. So we can have just an acclamation. There's a vote of acclamation. We do not need to also take a roll call vote. It is either just yes or no. Is there a vote of acclamation? Hey, if you're not opposed, we are going to vote this person into the position of VPF, Vice President of Finance, whatever that is. The duration and term limits, your term limit is from July 1st to June 30th. You can only serve 2 terms on the board. So that is up to you how you serve those terms. But again, that is July 1st to June 30th for your term as a board member or a regional officer. So I wanted to get into the elections committee a little bit, just make sure that you know who is the election committee, how they are composed, and things like that. So the composition of your elections committee, there are at least 5 volunteers. They cannot be a candidate, they cannot be a board member, they cannot be a regional officer, and they are selected by the elections chair. There's also one unbiased advisor, meaning that advisor is one from a region that might be underrepresented by the students. So maybe the students are all from specific regions. The advisor is from a different one. The advisor also doesn't have any skin in the game, meaning none of their students are the ones that are running, or an acquaintance is not running. And the same thing for our volunteers. They will not have any of their friends and things like that and students like that are running for a position. The responsibilities of the elections committee is one, reviewing and recommending any revisions to the elections policy. So they will make those changes. And that's why you're seeing this webinar, is there were some changes that were made after last year. So we wanted to make sure that we got all this information out to you. They will also meet at least once prior to General Assembly to review the on-site elections process review. So they're going to meet to talk about, hey, if we do receive any violations, or anyone that comes to us and says, hey, I think this person did not, fulfill these requirements, then they'll talk about how they are going to proceed while they are there at General Assembly. There is a restriction on committee members. As I said, the member cannot run. That it also means that they cannot accept a nomination from the floor after serving on the elections committee. So if they have been serving on the elections committee, they met already, they get to GA and someone nominates them, they are not allowed to accept that nomination. They cannot have friends or other students from their college running. Again, no skin in the game. We want unbiased students that are going to serve in this role. And they're really here to hear all disputes prior to the results being announced. So that is the elections process. After you receive, after you win your role, get into that position, the executive director will reach out and other staff will reach out to give you these forms. You need to fill these forms within 2 weeks of getting into your position. It is the disclosure consent form, a liability waiver, an emergency contact, code of conduct agreement, your current schedule to make sure that we can verify that you are a student. And you also need to take an ethics training. And again, we want to emphasize this all has to get in between the first 2 weeks, because if you do not, again, that will go up to the runner-up, and that position will then fall down to them. All right, so I sped through that. I wanted to let you know, again, the officer responsibilities webinar is going to happen next week on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Please take down the meeting ID, join us. If you want to hear a little bit more about the role that you might be running for, that's just your time to be able to ask questions specifically to job duties and things like that. But at this time, I will take, and myself and Dr. Adams will take any questions that you might have on this elections process. So if you do have some questions, please raise your hand and we'll go from there. Or you can put it in the chat. I do want to, for those that might be watching this later, there was a question in the chat, can student trustees endorse? And the response was yes, a student trustee can endorse you after you're verified and prior to the General Assembly. There was a question about the meeting ID. Here again is the meeting ID. The meeting ID is 881-5335-3324. Again, something that I did not mention earlier is your campaigning does not start until you receive confirmation that you can run. So again, if I were to go back to our elections process, you will be notified on the timeline here, notified of eligibility on February 23rd. Your campaigning cannot start until after this date, and you are notified that you can run for this position. All right, so making sure that you are notified of your eligibility before you start your campaigning. Otherwise, that would disqualify you, because you're that's the campaigning period, February 23rd until the start of General Assembly. That means if you decide that you are not going to turn in a candidate statement and just wait until nominations from the floor, well, guess what? You're out of luck. There is no campaigning that you can do other than your forum and information session. That is it. So making sure that if you want to campaign between February 23rd and General Assembly, you have to turn in your intent to run, and you have to get in your candidate statement. So making sure you're doing that. So I got a couple other questions. Hey, how do endorsements work? That's a great question. So in the past, what I've seen is if you want to possibly get on a student government agenda and place yourself on an agenda as an agenda item, you can do that. And I've seen that happen in the past, where you go to a student government, you're placed on the agenda, you would give them a speech, your spiel, they would ask you questions, and they would take action to endorse you. You might have an endorsement from a specific individual. Maybe they give you a quote saying why you would be great for that position. You would then have to ask them that you can use that, and making sure that there's some sort of documentation that accompanies that endorsement, so that the elections committee knows, yes, this person said that they would endorse this individual. So that's how endorsements would work. It would need some sort of documentation, minutes from a meeting, or an email, some sort of message from the other individual saying, yes, I do endorse this individual. What is being verified mean? And I'm guessing, Hestia, you're going into what is verification as far as eligibility. And what it is on our intent to run application, you would turn in your name, your email, contact information, all of that stuff. There's also a form that gives you that you would give to your advisor to make sure that you fulfill this eligibility criteria. So you're either enrolled and within 5 units, and you're in good academic standing, or you're part of an adult education program, or you're part of the disabled student population. So I wanted to make sure that that was said. Once you get verified there, then you'll receive that verification of your eligibility, and then you can start campaigning all the way up until General Assembly. All right, I see Scott Lee. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, so I'm actually the delegate from my school. Would I be allowed to run and vote for myself, or how will that work?
That is a great question. Yes, you are the delegate, and we even have this happen in regional delegate assembly meetings. If you are a delegate running for an open position that's there, you are still allowed to vote for yourself. And I would actually say I would encourage you to vote for yourself, right? That's one pretty much free vote. That's not a conflict of interest. You were voted into that position as the delegate to be able to give your students a voice, and their voices to, have you be there. So you can run even if you are a delegate, and you can vote for yourself. That is totally allowed.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Want to make sure that we get through everything. There is no gray areas. We want to make sure that everything is laid out. We don't want to run into any violations or anything like that into the future. So we want to make sure that we answer as many questions as possible. As always, you can reach out to the executive director, Dr. Adams, at jadams@ssccc.org. If you have something that comes up after this. Dr. Adams does serve as our elections chair. So that is also a way for you to communicate with her and make sure that you have all of your questions answered. There was a question, and this was one that I wanted to bring up to you, Dr. Adams, also, because this has happened in the past. Can former members of the SSCCC or former student trustees endorse?
Yes, if they're former representatives, yes, as long as they're within the endorsement period.
Yes, as long as it's during the endorsement period, and as long as when we say former, that means they no longer hold a role or a title with us. Not that they're transitioning out, right? But they no longer hold that role. So making sure that it is, past, student leaders, that is completely fine. So thank you. That's a great question. Any other questions? Want to get them all out right now. I think there's one more in the chat. Okay, thank you very much. That's actually just a comment. All right, so with that, then I will end this recording. Thank you so much for being here. As I said, if you do have other questions, please reach out. Endorsements are only for the students, right? Yes, so endorsements are for the students that are running, so the candidates. You would want to endorse one of those candidates, and as we said, it cannot be anyone associated with the SSCCC, whether it's board of directors, a board member, a regional officers, anyone like that. But outside students, doesn't have to be a student, it could be somebody else, but anyone else on the outside can endorse one of the candidates. But yes, as I said, thanks so much for being here. We greatly appreciate it. If you do have questions, please reach out. We're here to help. And yes, best of luck to you. Please make sure to turn in that intent to run application, and I will drop it in the chat right now if you want to stick around, or you can reach out and I will make sure that you get it.